So I think one of the things that I was really impressed with the Liberal Vannin Party is that spirit of standing for liberalism. And to me, liberalism is this idea of having respect for the human rights, for the freedom of speech, for the freedom of religion, for the freedom of association that is so important to liberalism, but also to have respect for our role as custodians. And so that's respect for custodians of this island, geographically, environmentally, economically, but also socially. And that is, in 2019, when there is, a lot of perhaps fraying of community bonds in other parts of the world, one of the things that I think is really important and impresses me about the Liberal Vannin team is their emphasis, not just on the individual, but also on our service as a community to build a better place to live.
I'll come back to liberalism in a bit more detail in a bit, but in terms of the post itself then, that you've now been appointed to, tell us a bit about your new roles and responsibilities within the party, if you could.
Sure. So Kate Beecroft was re-elected as the leader of the Parliamentary Party, and in that sense, I, as the chair of the organisational wing, as it were, will be working closely with her, but also Laurie Hooper, the member for Ramsey, and so in that sense, we'll be providing support to them, but also we'll be listening very hard to the people of the Isle of Man to improve our policy platform, especially as we head towards a future election. I think one of the most important things that the Liberal Vannin Party can and will do is to fight for the interests of the people of the Isle of Man, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what this business is all about. It's about standing up for what's right for the people of the Isle of Man.
So you've mentioned 2 representatives in the House of Keys currently. So you're, from my take from that, you're kind of like the bridge then, I guess. Would that be true?
In a way, they're very active in their own local communities, and we'll be supporting them in addition to that. And so I think there's a real opportunity for people who want to get involved and to be serving their community. I think there's a great opportunity for people to do that with the Liberal Vannin team.
You've partly answered this question already, but what characteristics or attributes in your colleagues in the party did you find appealing, or did you think were sort of parallel with yours, perhaps?
Sure. So I think one of the things that was quite remarkable is that Laurie and Kate both have a remarkable sense of humility, and I think that they very much see themselves as representatives of the people rather than rulers of the people. And I think that attitude is really the most important thing, because at the end of the day, these are public servants who are there to serve the public, and that attitude, I think, is really important.
I'm going to quote from you now from a post on social media. You said that liberalism is probably the greatest force for good in the history of humanity. And you said that let us hope that liberalism continues to prosper, and that we can be faithful custodians of building upon what our forebears have left us. So, again, you've answered this a bit already. How would you sort of succinctly define what liberalism is?
So liberalism is, at its heart, a respect and a support for the rights of each of us to individually prosper. So many famous liberals throughout history might be someone like Thomas Jefferson, through to Adam Smith, through to and in that sense, it's quite a broad tent, it's a broad church, and this idea of human rights, of freedom of the individual, a fair and independent court system, a fair and open respect for freedom of religion. These are all things that liberalism has given us, and it was founded basically about 300 years ago, about 300 miles from here on the Isle of Man. And in that sense, the Isle of Man is such a wonderful beneficiary of those principles.
You speak a bit about forebears and about being custodians of what's been sort of given to us, or what's gone before. Is there a particular emphasis on sort of the long term in liberalism, do you feel, perhaps?
I think it's really important to recognise that we are custodians, that we've inherited something from our predecessors, but also as custodians, and I love the word custodian because it also implies that we have to protect this for our children. And in that sense, as custodians of the Isle of Man, we have an obligation to protect this island and to protect this community, so that our children are able to benefit from the rights and the freedoms that we have. And so in that sense, standing up against the twin evils of Nazism and communism in the last century, liberalism won that. And that was a wonderful victory, because it means that now we are free to enjoy everything that it has left for us.
You've mentioned a bit about the Liberal Party in Australia and about your kind of affiliation with that party in the past, perhaps, if that's the right word. Does liberalism mean something different in the Southern Hemisphere, or is it largely kind of covering similar ground?
It's a very similar in that, I guess the broader concept of liberalism as it is here is certainly a broad church. It's a broad tent, and that is, there are some people, even within the party today, who are a little bit more classical liberal in the sense of a little bit more libertarian, a little bit more sceptical of state power, and there are also people who are a bit more in the way of progressive liberalism or social liberalism, and in that sense, it is a very broad tent, but I think that one of the things that really unites those competing ideas is this very basic idea of human rights, and that is respect for the rights to freedom of speech, of freedom of association, freedom of religion, and those things that are really important to also use them as a platform to care for the people in our community who need support, and to also ensure that people are rewarded for a hard day's work, and that people at the end of the day, we have to respect the right of people to keep what they earn and to build on that.
Just from a brief Google for my interest, really, apart from anything else, the Australian Liberal Party tends to promote economic liberalism, and in reference to free markets and to small government. Are these sorts of principles things that you feel are objectives for the Isle of Man, perhaps?
Sure. So for me, as someone who was born at the end of the 20th century, it's very clear to me that our Western society, we definitely want a market economy. The idea of communism or socialism, Nazism, they failed. And so instead, what we want here is to have a market economy, but not a market society. And so in that sense, there are things that are not financially tradable that are well outside the economic realm and should be outside the economic realm. And so, for example, supporting families and to supporting community groups, whether it be the sport that we spoke about earlier, but also community groups, whether it be the beach buddies, we're going down to have a barbecue with friends and neighbours, and that in that sense, I think that idea of liberalism is not just about money, but it's about community as well. And, that's really important to find the right balance there.
I'll stop speaking about Australia now for a bit, but thinking about perhaps a bit closer to home, the Liberal Democrats in the UK, if you were to sort of plot a Venn diagram, if you like, are the views kind of overlapping with them as well?
Well, to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, we have no affiliation with the Liberal Democrats, and our mission is to listen to and fight for the interests of the people of the Isle of Man. And so if that means we agree with the Conservatives one day, Labor next day, Liberal Democrats the day after, that's fine, because our North Star, our guiding principle is what's best for the people of the Isle of Man. And so we don't have any formal affiliation with them, and our focus is on standing up for the people of the Isle of Man, not for any other countries.
Okay, even closer to home then, with a fresh pair of eyes to the Isle of Man, or certainly a fresher pair. You've mentioned you've been here for a good few years now. What do you think of the current system of parliament and the current system of governance on the island?
Sure. So I think that's super challenging in many ways, and because we have to be realistic, there's only 80,000 people or 85,000 people living here on the Isle of Man, and so there's a remarkable level of officialdom here for a community of our relative size. And so in that sense, one of the things that's really important, is to have proper checks and balances, and so that'll be something that the Liberal Vannin Party will continue to work through. The way that we have an unelected legislative council is quite odd, in that if their job is to provide scrutiny over the other house, then you can't be appointed by the House of Keys. And so there's a very obvious contradiction there. How you resolve that will be something that have to work out, in the future. It's very difficult to scrutinise your boss, and that's why if for example, in business, where I've worked in business for many years now, the audit committee does not report to the chief executive officer typically. These principles of governance are universal, and so that they're the things that is quite unusual about the Isle of Man, and needs to be fixed at some stage in the future.
I guess we can have a chat about LibVan and his recommendations another time maybe, but what about party politics on the island? Or perhaps I'll rephrase that, the lack of party politics on the island maybe. Do you feel that's, I don't know, a different frame of reference perhaps to elsewhere?
Well, there are good political parties and there are bad political parties, and so in that sense, our focus is on listening to the people of the Isle of Man and coming up with good ideas to make people's lives better. And so whether that happens through, political parties or not is this perhaps a second order issue. Our focus is on, listening to the people of the Isle of Man so that we serve them, because they're the master. And so in that sense, each of our our members of the House of Keys, their first allegiance is always to the people of the Isle of Man. The second allegiance is to their constituency. Their third and subservient allegiance is to the Liberal Vannin Party. And that's as it should be, because it's far more important to serve the people of the Isle of Man than it is to serve any political party.